Well, good morning. This is James with My Home Electrician, where we believe that success is a symptom of good relationships. Today's focus is going to be on really, I guess if we were to boil it down, what we're really going to discuss is when should I replace my plugs and light switches? Okay, what are we talking about? We're talking about guys that look like this, guys that look like this. For plugs, in general, you might have something really fancy and cool in your house that we've probably installed. Or your switches might look like this, or they might look like that. This is what we're talking about. When do I replace them? So, when you replace them is going to change greatly. There's what the manufacturer warranties it at, and then there's how long can I realistically get out of it. Different manufacturers would be like the people who make the switches and outlets and devices receptacles. The common ones will be like Leviton, Lutron, Cooper, Legrand, these companies, as well as several others online. Typically, it ranges, they warranty their light switches and plugs for anywhere from 2 years to 5 years, depending on what it is, what grade it is. It gets overly complex and convoluted, lots of legalese. We don't really need to go there or try to understand it unless you want to, and then we'll go and read every single one of them and figure it out. It'll be a fun and exciting day. But ultimately, when do I need to change this guy out? So, if we're going off a warranty, that means that all of us need to replace our plugs and lights every 2 to 5 years, our plugs and light switches. That would be insane. I hope you agree with that, the idea that you have to go through hundreds of light switches and plugs in your home every 2 to 5 years would be a maintenance nightmare and be very expensive too because they add up. So practically speaking, we're gonna off the record call it 10 to 20 years, or probably closer to 15 years to 20 years. However, there's some exceptions to that, and there's where that ballpark amount of time, off the record, don't say you heard it from me that, hey, he said it was good for 15 years. It's burning my house down, but he said. So this is off the record, and you'll understand why in a second. Really what we're looking at is usage. If you'll notice, on just example, this switch is nothing special. I didn't pick this switch on purpose. It's just one that we had in a box, grabbed it. They're all generically the same from the different manufacturers. Some have different features, but none of them will matter to you or this video. If you look at the front of the switch, it's nothing wild or crazy. The style is called Decorator, or what we call Deco or Decora for short. You'll see that's what it is. You'll notice it's got this metal on top and bottom. The plugs are kind of the same way. On the back, you'll notice, hey, we've got even more plastic. And then we've got screws here where the wires go in and holes for specific size wires and types of wires to go in. Everyone's got their opinions on that. We got this little green, screw here for something else. But you'll notice that this is dominantly just plastic and sheet steel or some other kind of steel. Not very solid. I can probably twist this and get this guy to pop. Yeah, it's already cracking apart. It doesn't take much or much force. These are very delicate, despite how much we use them. And they are very prone to breakage, overheating, because again, they're just very thin metal, some screws that are just tapped into this thin metal, and plastic, all right? And the only thing that's between you and your electrical that's ran in your walls and your boxes is this magic device. Really what we're looking at is usage. And items that, of course, get used more get worn out more. So if there's that magic plug in the hallway that you use every single time when you vacuum, then that plug's probably going to get worn out than the guest bedroom that has nothing plugged into it ever. The light switches for your kitchen or your outside lighting or your hallway lighting, those are switches that we see wear out a lot. But James, how will I know? How would I know when this magic plastic and thin little stamped metal device is failing? You're the electrician, you should know. Let me give you some tips that'll work for you without having to have someone like me come out and charge you money to replace it. When you turn this light switch on, we'll touch light switches first. When you turn this light switch on and you notice at different times when you turn it on, the lights flicker. If you're able to push on this light switch and make your lights turn on and off without pushing on it to turn it on and off, you're actually just rocking it and it's going. Or if you go to turn the light switches on and occasionally you hear this crackling sound or popping sound as things turn on, or a buzzing sound, that's a sign that your switch most likely needs to be replaced because it is dying. And that burning, crackling sound or those flickering lights are due to a connection that is dying. on the inside of the switch. It is burning apart and eventually will either stop working or potentially cause a fire. So might be a good time to replace that. The other one, plugs. We got our two most common plugs. This one has the tabs broken off of it. This one does not. This one's that decorator style or decora style. This is duplex, very fancy. I think this one's used. We took it out because it was all beat up. Thank your tile guys. Sorry, tile guys. I love your work, but how you treat my electrical is just ungodly. So we got a side beef. I love them. We love each other. But man. All right. So where were we? Duplex, decora, or decorator. Same thing. Neither one is better. There's two different styles. They're both plastic, both metal yoked. Sorry, this guy on the top that goes all the way through, it's called a yoke. Same deal. Plastic and plastic. Screws drilled through plastic. Metal supported by plastic. Got the green screws on there on both sides for your ground wiring systems that bond this yoke and provide power to the round spot in the middle. That's your ground. Very fancy stuff, but at the end of the day, still just plastic and thin stamped metal with screws in it. So James, how will I know if these are dying? You're not making any sense. You're just talking about why I should be scared, right? About these flimsy plastic pieces of equipment that I've run my whole life around. And how am I supposed to know when they're dying? That's a good question. Again, usage. So we see those areas that I mentioned, hallways, entryways, exterior lighting, outdoor plugs, because they take a beating in the elements, especially here in Texas. We've noticed that if the plug is no longer holding an outlet or it's wanting to just fall out, you know the one I'm talking about because you're always that guy sitting there just pinching that plug back together to make it sit in there and make contact just a little more while you put it off, saying one day I'll replace it, and you never do. That will eventually cause a fire or something to melt down. Hopefully it's just small scale and not large scale. If you have a current home, it'll be tripping your breaker all the time. If you have an older home, you should probably have that looked at. We'll leave that alone. So if you notice that you have to do the little pinch game with your plugs and your vacuum cleaner or lamps or, whatever, and you're plugging it in and it keeps wanting to fall out, it's a sign the plug is failing most likely. It could be the thing you're plugging in, but usually it's the outlet or the receptacle, this magic device, the receptacle. That's a good sign it needs to get replaced. What we've seen also is that this thing gets hot, and this is just, you can look in here and it's literally glue that's holding this decorative face onto the black or blue, gray, whatever the backer is on this guy, on that specific device. It's just glue. So as this thing heats up, you'll notice one day you go to plug something in and you pull it back off and the whole thing just crumbles and falls apart. And you see just metal tabs inside, okay? That's probably a good sign too, it should get replaced. Another one, like we talked about with switching, is that crackling, popping, buzzing sound. When you plug stuff into it and you have to like rock it back and forth and you hear that and it's got a lot of movement and you're hearing crackling or popping, most of the time just a loose screw, but by the time that's happening, this thing has built up so much heat, I still recommend replacement. Because if I'm gonna take the time to go into your house, to take this guy out just to tighten screws, I can turn around and just put in a new device. At $1 and change to $3 and change at most, depending on the device, just replace it. So there's your tips and tricks for how long should a plug or a light switch last. There's the warranty of that 2 to 5 year minimum or maximum, depending on manufacturer and depending on what the device is from that manufacturer. But in reality terms, most of us will probably get 10 to 15 years out of a device and probably, 20 to 25 years out of devices that we don't use at all ever before they need replacement. So if your house is falling inside that window or you're noticing any of these signs, the popping, the crackling, stuff starting to fall apart, getting hot, lights flickering, things like that, it's a good sign you should probably call somebody out and have them go through and replace them. So in another video, we might cover DIY receptacle replacement, so that way you're actually doing it correctly. Because I know you people out there who are like, how hard can it be? And then you call me back with shame, wondering why it didn't work. So I know who you are. But yes, be reaching out to your local electrician to get those things checked on before you end up in a serious situation over a part that's a less than $5 part. Definitely not worth the fire or physical people safety, the use safety part. Definitely not worth it. So until next time, this is James Adams with My Home Electrician, where we believe that success is a symptom of good relationships. You have a great day.